I'm Natasha Donovan, illustrator of Borders, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Natasha Donovan about Borders and more. This podcast is available on Apple Podcast and Google Podcasts, and it's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe. Natasha is a Métis illustrator, originally from Vancouver, who specializes in comics and children's books. Her illustrations have appeared in The Other Side, an anthology of queer paranormal romance, the Mothers of Exan series by Brett Hewson, and the graphic novel Wonderful Women of History published by DC. Her most recent project is the graphic novel Borders. Borders from Little Brown and Company is based on a short story by Thomas King in 1993 about a boy and his mother who tried to take a road trip from Alberta to Salt Lake City. When they reach the American-Canadian border, they identify as Blackfoot, causing problems and putting the pair in limbo between Canada and America. What unfolds is a powerful story about justice, identity, and belonging. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Natasha Donovan about Borders and more. So, Natasha Donovan, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Thanks for having me, John.
I appreciate your time. What I normally do to start off the interview is ask the creator about their first comic book. So I'm wondering if you remember, what was the first comic book that you read?
So I went to a French immersion school in elementary school, and part of the way that I actually went to late French immersion, so we started in grade 6, and the way that they got us into it was through comics. We had a lot of Asterix and Obelix and Tintin and that sort of thing. So I think those are probably my first comics that I really fell in love with.
Sure. Yeah, good stuff. That's for sure. So that being said, I'm wondering who or what inspires you to create today?
There are so many amazing illustrators. I'm really into the kind of indie comic scene in Canada. Gillian Tamaki is like incredible. Mm-hmm. She's just one of my idols. Oh man. It's hard to think of more off the top of my head, but just other contemporary illustrators are all doing such amazing things.
Sure. Absolutely. Good stuff. So we're here talking about one of your latest projects. You've got so many on the go, but let's talk about the first one called Borders. I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about that story and maybe how you came to be involved with it.
Yeah, it's a graphic novel adaptation of a short story that Thomas King published, I think, in 1993 or something around that time. He said he can't remember when it came out. So it was actually, I believe, sort of the idea of Suzanne Sutherland at HarperCollins. She was the editor on that project, and she was the one who approached me with the idea. Just emailed me, and I was really excited because it was a story that I had actually fell in love with in high school. So I read the email a few times, and I was like, am I reading this right? This is crazy. And then just kind of started brainstorming with her.
What is the story about for those not familiar with it?
It's pretty, the plot-wise, it's pretty simple. I think a lot of the sort of richness comes out in the character interaction, so I think it's okay if I give some stuff away. So it's just basically about this boy and his mom. They are traveling to see the boy's sister. They're going from Alberta, Canada, to Salt Lake City in the U.S. And when they get to the border, the boy's mom refuses to say that her citizenship is, Canadian or American. She will only say Blackfoot. And because of that, she's turned around at the U.S. border, but she does the same thing at the Canadian border. So they kind of get stuck in this limbo, and they spend a few nights in the duty-free parking lot, which, sounds a little like not super exciting, but I think it actually turns into a pretty compelling story.
Sure, absolutely, yeah, it's well recommended, that's for sure. And I want to talk a bit about, if you can elaborate a bit about working with the writer Thomas King. How did you two interact with that to come up with the final product?
I mean, Thomas, I actually spoke with him for the first time today, if you can believe it. We did an interview earlier with CBC, and that was very sort of surreal. So he basically gave the project his blessing. I think Suzanne talked to him. She told him, this is what I want to do. I'm going to, find an illustrator. And I'm sure that he signed off at various points, but I wasn't actually in contact with him. So most of the collaboration was between Suzanne and I. I think his feeling, and he said this earlier today, was kind of that he was finished with the story. He wrote it and he put it out there in the world, and he was ready to see it go through its sort of natural lifespan out there in the world.
Right, absolutely. Good stuff. I know that I mentioned that you're just busy as an illustrator. You also provided the illustration in This Place 150 Years Retold, which is certainly a book that people just keep raving about. I think it's something that needs to be read by everyone. You did a illustration for a story called Red Clouds, written by Jen Storm. I wonder if you could talk a wee bit about that and how that came to be.
I had already been working with Portage and Main on the Mother series of picture books, so I had that connection with them. And they contacted me and asked to bring me in on a couple of stories. And I mean, it's such an exciting project. The scope is kind of unlike anything that I know of. And Red Clouds was written by Jen Storm, and it's a kind of scary a little bit story, and there was like a bit of a sort of supernatural element to it, which was really fun from an illustration perspective. But it was also just really a privilege and an honor to be included in such a monumental creation.
Did you know going into this project that you'd be part of this broader scope of book?
I had an idea of what the project as a whole would look like, but you kind of get bogged down in your own minuscule portion of the work, and then seeing the entire thing as a finished product is pretty mind-boggling. Oh, sure.
Yeah. No, that's tremendous. Good stuff there. Also, another work that you did was for DC Comics' Wonderful Women of the World. I know that's been delayed a bit, but finally it's going to see the light of day. You did work with the writer Tracy Sorrell about Tara Fraser. And I wonder if you could talk a wee bit about that project.
That one was really fun. I worked with Tracy. We had actually just finished working on a nonfiction picture book about Marigold Ross, who helped. She was an engineer. She helped design airplanes. So we were kind of on an airplane kick, I guess.
Right.
And the story is just about, I believe she's a Cree woman who started her own airline, and it operates, I think, out of YVR in Vancouver. And that was just really cool because it's a contemporary story. It was simple, just a few pages, but we all got together on an email chain and like just to do a story about something that is happening in the town where I grew up. Yeah, it was really fun.
That's pretty cool. After working on Marigold Ross, which you mentioned was aerospace, did you have an affinity for drawing airplanes after that?
I don't think I'll ever have much of an affinity. It's still something that I really struggle with. I obviously my area of preference is like the natural world, but it was an interesting challenge, and I think it was valuable for my growth as an illustrator. But certainly, if I am ever presented with, the choice, I'll go for drawing fish and ferns.
It reminds me of the time Jason Lowe worked with Chip Zdarsky on Afterlift. It was all about this Uber driver in the afterworld, and he had to draw cars. He said, I don't want to draw cars again. So
I can totally understand that.
There you go.
Yeah, that was kind of once I really started getting into working on borders, I was like, oh gosh, I've really got to draw this car over and over again, don't I?
Yeah. Oh my. Well, there you go. Good stuff. And yet another book that's coming out just around the corner is The Wolf Mother, a middle grade graphic novel. Wonder if you could talk a wee bit about that one.
The Wolf Mother is part of a larger series. It's kind of the series that sort of launched my career, actually. It's a beautiful writing written by Brett Hewson. Each book focuses on a different keystone species on the West Coast here. Yeah, we've been working on this series for, it's got to be close to 4 or 5 years. I think probably, yeah, I can measure it because came out around the first one came out around the time I got married. So I've been married for 5 years.
Congrats. There you go. That's great.
I think the Wolf Mother is the 5th, and there will be 10, I believe. So
wow.
Yeah, I really have a great love for that project. It's going to be actually quite sad when it's over.
I bet. Well, given all this illustration talk we've been doing, I'm wondering if we could switch gears and talk about the tools you use to create your art. I wonder if you could walk me through your creative process.
Yeah, it's, as I'm sure everyone goes through this, it's sort of evolved over time. For my first picture book, The Sockeye Mother, I remember I used a lot of just brush and ink. I was not very well versed in Photoshop or any kind of digital art at that point, and that was actually kind of turned into a digital art boot camp at the end of that project, putting it together for publication. And over time, I've sort of grown to embrace the digital side of things just out of necessity. It's a lot more efficient. I still have a lot of love for ink and brush, but I use a lot of Procreate lately on right. the iPad. I actually did borders entirely on Procreate, and it works really well for my purposes. I don't necessarily need to be making these gigantic files with lots of layers, so I like it, and I like being able to. I did most of borders during the pandemic, and I actually, as a way to get out of the house, would just go and work in the car, drive somewhere nice and work in the car. So
sure,
it was great for that.
Do you think you sacrifice anything, though, in going to digital as opposed to the traditional? I know you'd use the digital because of speed. You've been working so much trying to get a lot of stuff done, but do you think anything is sacrificed in that process?
I mean, honestly, I kind of think the only thing that I sacrifice is just my own satisfaction. In terms of the output, I find that it's basically comparable for me. I mean, I know that there are people who strongly prefer one over the other, but there really is nothing like the feeling of putting brush down on paper. But honestly, it's pretty good.
Well, there was, you probably may have, a lot of folks are still trying to catch up this week in all the technology news that came out, but Microsoft just introduced a Surface tablet. I don't have the name in front of me, but the pen that they provide actually provides a tactile feedback as you're drawing, which I'm curious to know how artists will relate to that. So time will tell, because I know a lot of people like the iPad Pro and the Apple Pencil just because of all the tools that you get along with it, but having a tactile feel might be the sort of the trick there that they haven't quite overcome. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'd be curious to test that out.
Yeah, for sure. So we've talked about a lot tonight, a lot of different projects, and I'm wondering if there's anything that you can talk about that's coming around the corner, anything that you can publicly mention.
Yeah, I do have a few things on the go. Obviously, the Mother series is continuing with the Raven Mother coming up next, but that one's kind of still in the works. The thing that I'm currently spending most of my time on will be coming out next year. It's a nonfiction picture book written by Patricia Newman, and it's about the Elwha River. the river that had a large dam in it. It's on the Olympic Peninsula. Just sort of the story of damming that river and then removing the dam and the kind of cascading positive effects that had on the ecosystem.
Very good. So where do you recommend people go to find out more about your current and future projects, either online or through social media?
I am very bad at keeping up with my social media, but I do have a Twitter account. I'm just at Natasha M. Donovan. So I try to retweet. I know that my publishers would like me to come up with my own original tweets more. And I also have a website that's just natashadonovan.com.
Great. Well, Natasha, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering if there's something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview.
I guess what I really like to say in a lot of interviews, I end up saying it, is just if anyone is hoping for, aspiring artists who are listening to this, hoping for advice, I would just try to emphasize to do lots and lots of work, even if it feels bad, even if it looks like you hate it, and just keep powering through it, because that is how you learn.
Thanks to Natasha for the chat. You can discover more about Natasha on Twitter at Natasha M. Donovan and online at natashadonovan.com. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2021.